Good evening. First tonight, the shocking impact of online content on our children's behaviour. Parents in Jersey have been told of examples that include school pupils sharing explicit images, making threats of a sexual nature, and one child even throwing themselves from a moving car when the device was taken away.
In a moment, we'll hear from the head teacher at Victoria College. But first, Emma Volney has this report and a warning: you may find some of the details distressing.
It is a worrying insight into the content children are consuming online and what they think is acceptable to say in real life. "I hate women," an insult heard far too often in Jersey secondary schools. "She's breedable," a phrase equally disturbing. "Hitler isn't real," online conspiracy theories leading to a lack of judgment. And "kill yourself," what now passes for playground banter. Hugely concerning for teachers and parents.
It scares me, and I have a son and I have a daughter, so from both perspectives it frightens me a lot. It doesn't seem... I think we're at a tipping point where things are now becoming quite extreme, and I really think that there is a safeguarding crisis which we are just not acknowledging.
A crisis that when a Year 8 boy was asked in class to write a letter to his hero, he chose Tristan Tate, one of the Tate brothers accused of radicalising boys into extreme misogyny and arrested last year over allegations of rape and human trafficking. Well, schools have also shared examples of boys asking whether it's normal to choke women, sharing explicit images on social media, upskirting and having serious tantrums when their devices are taken away. Douglas has a 7-year-old son and has been looking into the psychological impact of children being overexposed to the web.
The worst we had in my childhood was one of the local kids had a naughty magazine. The sort of thing they're exposed to these days is exponentially more explicit. And how do you form a healthy, beautiful, intimate relationship when your first exposure to that entire world is inherently ugly? It does incredible damage to the nature of the people that we're raising.
The next generation addicted to social media sites that use algorithms to learn what they enjoy so they can keep them hooked.
I mean, my son doesn't have access to social media, he doesn't have access to a smartphone, but at some point he will. And my point and the smartphone-free childhood movement is to just delay that because they're not ready.
97% of British children have a smartphone by the time they've reached the age of 12. Some schools require pupils to lock them away during lessons, but there is a safeguarding crisis that's only going to deepen as technology continues to evolve. Emma Volney, ITV News.
Well, watching that with us is the head of Victoria College, Dr Gareth Hughes, who organised that online safety meeting. Thanks so much for coming in. Pleasure. I mean, it's absolutely shocking what we saw there. Just give us an idea of how bad the problem is across Jersey and the islands, for that matter, at the moment.
Well, thanks for inviting me on. And you know, this is not a problem that is confined to one school, one island. This is a global issue. You know, we have young people, a generation born into online technology, and in many ways, the restrictions and the expectations and the education have not quite caught up yet with the landscape that young people are working in. So we all have a responsibility to help support our young people to navigate what is a really difficult world for them. Many of these things that they're exposed to a little bit earlier than we would have been in our generation. And we need to make sure that there is a healthy relationship with the online world, because that online world is there for them. It will be there for them for the rest of their lives. So when they're in their formative years, we need to do as much as we can to help them.
Yeah, so in terms of school policies island-wide, what do you think needs to change?
Well, I can speak at it from my own personal experience. We've brought in a phone-free environment for our young people between the ages of 11 to 16. That has been very successful, and our Year 7s lock their phones away during the school day. But that is in order to generate a little bit of a break for our young people so that they can concentrate in some small part of their day on learning and being young people, getting their social cues and their relationships from their peers in the yard.
You mentioned there in terms of the fact that your policy at your school, I just wonder, is it a policy, frankly, that should be a blanket policy across all lines? If everyone knew what the rules were at every school, wouldn't that help?
Well, I think every school has their own individual policies, and I would I would respect any school leader to make the best judgment for their particular school. It wouldn't be right for me to make that call, but I do see the benefit of more restrictions on the youngest students to make sure that they are not overly exposed to this. We must remember that as soon as they leave the school site, those phones come out again. So I think that there is a discussion to be had about what's the right thing for particular schools, and particularly in the particular age groups as well. So we've made a very clear call that it is our younger students that have more restrictions. Our older students that are maybe a little bit more able to manage that have a little bit more freedoms with their phones.
I guess the government could take control of it and legislate for all young people in all schools. I mean, is there any jurisdiction in particular that we should be looking to who are doing it well? Like, for example, in Australia, they're looking at banning social media for under 16s.
So I know that, they've certainly gone down that route and are looking at that. You know, you've also got the French government that are looking at mobile phone bans in schools. I think it's a difficult line to make an executive order on, because it is just part of the solution. Legislation is part of it, but we also have a strong sort of demand for good education, to liaise well with our parents. An arbitrary ban on phones, you could argue, would just drive the problem underground, because those students will access it in their own way.
Yeah, and I get that, but again, when you hear about the problem, when you hear someone talking about actually that this is impacting their brains, do we not need to make that drastic step, perhaps?
Doesn't it become a public health problem?
Yeah.
Well, and again, we are still at in many ways, the sort of the Wild West of this. This is still a very young problem in the world. We're only talking about one generation, really, that is been exposed to this. So we don't yet know the long-term implications of what this will have, the impact it will have on young people. So you could look at the precautionary principle, which is to put slightly more stringent guidelines in place now, just in case there are damages going forward. But I would still maintain that it is not the sole solution. Good education, good work in schools, liaising positively with parents to make sure that they are supporting their young people.
And finally, talking about parents, obviously, kids are mostly in their care, so 18 hours of the day. What can they do to make sure their kids are safe? What should they be doing?
First and foremost, there needs to be a very honest and trusting relationship between young people and their parents. If young people feel that they can speak to their parents about some of the things that they see online, then they are more likely to develop that healthy relationship. As we say, in our online evening the other day, that there should be no right of confidentiality for a young person with their phone. Their parents should have open access to it. And, in your piece just then, of course, when we were young, we used bad language and so on. Parents might just have to turn a blind eye to some bad language to look for some of the real red flags around body image, extremism and so on, and to really open up that conversation and work with schools.
We'll have to leave it there, but Dr Gareth Hughes, thanks so much.